Episode 62, April 23 to 25, 1915. Through Death Valley with the ANZACs by Private Fred Fox, AIF. Read by Hamish Cato. From Commander-in-Chief to humble private is a far cry in the military hierarchy. But, supplementing Sir Ian Hamilton's magnificent account of the Gallipoli landing, we print the narrative of an Australian who took part in the ANZAC landing. How the first parties rushed ashore to almost certain death is here chronicled by one who on that fateful day was severely wounded. On April 23, the battalion was assembled on deck, and our commanding officer, Colonel Lyle Johnston, told us we had been selected by General Sir Ian Hamilton to storm the position selected for the Australian landing in Gallipoli. Gravely, he added that we must prepare, in any event, to do the job, and if necessary, be sacrificed. He had inspected the positions from a cruiser and gave us some idea of the work at hand. His statement was received with thunderous cheering. We were not only ready, we rejoiced that our chance had come. Rifles were oiled, and we saw to it that the points of our bayonet were sharp. On Saturday, April 24, a destroyer came alongside, and our two companies A and C at once embarked. We sailed to the end of Mudros Bay and boarded HMS London. There was a tremendous enthusiasm, and about 3 p.m, the flagship took up her position, and away we went, amid a storm of cheering from both the French and English transports and warships. We were in wonderful spirits and soon made friends with our naval comrades, who entertained us in the way that only Jack can do. We had a short service on the quarterdeck, in which the chaplain spoke most kindly to us, and then, left to our own devices, we had a look around the ship. Some of the time was spent in playing cards, and there was also a good impromptu concert. As night settled down, we made ourselves as comfortable as possible and composed ourselves to sleep. All lights were, of course, extinguished. Very early on Sunday morning, April 25, we were roused and went below, where we enjoyed a fine hot meal prepared for us by our friend Jack. There was no excitement, only a feeling of quiet confidence overall. We got our kits on, which consist of 200 rounds of ammunition each, 3 days' rations of bully beef and biscuits, also 3 empty sandbags to fill with earth when we got the opportunity. These things made up rather a heavy load, but our instructions were to take off the pack immediately we landed, and go for the enemy with the bayonet. We were not to fire a shot until daylight, or when ordered. About 2 a.m, we were ordered to embark on the boats, which were drawn up alongside with a steam pinnacle to tow them. This we did without any mishap, and the beach parties belonging to the warships followed us. It was all very weird in the absolute silence, with a very, very pale moon shining. I had no idea how far we were from the shore, but we steamed under the lee of the battleship for some time when the order came from the captain to carry on our own. Now was the critical time. I shall never forget that sight. There were 3 or 4 lines of us with a space of perhaps 100 yards between, going stealthily and slowly towards what? We seemed to have been hours on the way when the shape of the battleship faded away, and gradually we picked out the shores of the peninsula outlined against the sky. Most forbidding they looked too. There was rather an amusing incident about this time. I was in the second boat, and our steering officer in the pinnacle was zigzagging a little. A naval commander in the next tow asked him several times, sotto voce, to be more careful. He appeared to take no notice, and his superior roared, "For heaven's sake, steer straight, or you will spoil the whole show." We had to stifle our mirth, but it was very funny. The hills, which we could now discern through the gloom, were very grim and gaunt, and we felt that we had left all protection behind. There is something very consoling when one can see a battleship. However, we set our teeth and wriggled to get into anything approaching a comfortable position, for we were packed in the boats like sardines. No sign of life on shore could we see, and we were becoming confident that we should land unawares and surprise the Turks. Suddenly a light flashed ashore and was visible to us for about 5 minutes. We knew now what to expect. The enemy had spotted us. We were in it right up to the neck. The tension was relieved, and so I think was every soldier. To explain what followed, I should mention that as soon as the Pinnacle cast the tow off, half a dozen soldiers in each boat were told off to seize the oars and pull as hard as they could for the shore, beaching each boat separately. We could now see the land plainly, but the light was too bad to distinguish any movement ashore. We were about 30 yards away when the Pinnacle cast off. No sooner were the oars in position than, bang! From the right came the shrapnel. The Turks on the cliff and in the trenches were pouring forth a murderous fire from the rifle and machine gun. The range was point blank, and how they missed any of us is hard to say. No orders were given or wanted then. Every man not disabled at once jumped overboard. I handed my rifle to a sailor to hold and went over into the water up to the armpits. The poor fellow was handing my rifle back to me when a shrapnel shell burst just overhead and killed him. It was a terrible time. Under the water was a network of wires, and we were slipping and tripping about frightfully. A comrade of mine went under. I grabbed him up, and after a struggle, we managed to get ashore. This little incident was repeated all along the beach. Believe me, the noise was beyond imagination. All hell seemed to be let loose. We were shivering with the cold, but we wanted blood now. Off went the packs, the steel rang as we fixed bayonets, and forming into some sort of a line, up the cliff we rushed, regardless of the rifle or machine gun fire. Nothing could stop these mad Australians now. Advanced Australia, went up the battle cry. Cooeying and swearing, tripping and sliding, we were in amongst those Turks, and there was not one alive in their first line of trenches a quarter of an hour after our landing on this amazing and glorious Sunday morning of April 25th, 1915. No quarter was given, no prisoners were taken. Day was breaking quickly now, and after the first terrific rush, we had an opportunity to have a look around. We kept in the captured trenches, which were excellent, stored with food and ammunition, and saw a sight which gladdened our hearts. Dozens of transports steaming in full of troops. Destroyers too, and last but not least, our Lizzie. What a glorious cheer went up. It was great to have done this. But I must continue. The shrapnel and the snipers were still playing havoc with our landing parties, and the poor fellows were falling fast. Such heroism as those lads displayed may have been equalled, it can never have been surpassed. It is good to be British. Some of our boats were adrift with the whole of the crew out of action. There were lots of our comrades lying about too, in all sorts of positions, dead and wounded. Our medical officer, Captain Brennan, and his assistants were working like Trojans, but all they could do was to give the poor fellows quick first aid and leave them. All were heroes on that day. Our commanding officer came up, passed a word of praise and good cheer, and the brigadier was highly elated too. All was the work of a few minutes, taking longer to tell than it did to happen, but stern work was still before us. It was now our part to beat the enemy's counterattack. We hurried down the side of the ravine, enemy shrapnel and snipers dealing out death all the time, and gradually, as we got into line, the fire grew hotter and hotter. Men dropped like ninepins, and being in thick scrub, we could not see the enemy. It was ideal country for defence, but all against attack. This ravine was at once called Death Valley, a name that has stuck to it. It was a terribly hot day, and tried our tempers sorely. In fact, we saw red. We were fighting more or less in bunches of 3 or 4, always advancing. Some of us detached ourselves for sniping, and I swear, beat the enemy at their own game. The firing was deadly, and during the early morning caused a tremendous lot of casualties, and no mercy was shown. Suddenly, the fire on us slackened a little. The enemy's attention was partly diverted into a hydroplane from the battleships which was endeavouring to get the range. A tremendous amount of ammunition was wasted on the flying machine, but it sailed serenely on, and shortly after its disappearance, we were greatly cheered by the shots from the ships firing over our heads. We were now getting a bit of our own back. We could not see it, of course, but were cheered by messages which said that the Turkish reinforcements, which were being hurried up, were suffering terribly. We had no chance to dig ourselves in. We had to push the enemy from the beach to give our main body a chance. So on we went, never firing unless we could be sure of a result. Occasionally, we got into them with the bayonet, but they had already had their lesson and generally cleared out when we were close to them. If they had been given a moment's respite, we should have suffered more, and no doubt have been compelled to give way. As long as the Turks were on the run, our reinforcements with ammunition, picks, and other impedimenta had a sporting chance, for once they passed the enfilading shrapnel on the beach, they had a comparatively easy time before reaching the firing line. It was terrible, though, to see one's friends falling. We were comrades all, rendering first aid whenever possible, and our padre was as brave as a lion. Our officers were great too. They were equipped exactly the same as ourselves, but only carried a switch. And to see Major Drake Brockman, my company officer, smoking a cigarette and calmly walking up and down the line was something to inspire at the time, and to be remembered so long as memory lasts. Our brave old Colonel Lyle Johnston was as cool as a cucumber, cheering us all by his wonderful sang-froid. We called him Tipperary, and he was proud of his name and his boys. It was now about 12 noon, and we must have advanced a couple of miles. The firing line now was very much strengthened, our 1st and 2nd Brigades having by this time got a lot of their men on shore. An Indian mountain battery had also arrived, and with the guns of the battleships, was giving us great assistance. The earth fairly shook with the explosions when the big guns were fired, and the air was alive with bullets zip-zipping over our heads. Our advance was so rapid that the Turkish batteries found it rather hard to locate us with their shrapnel. In fact, in one case, we were right on them before they were aware of it, and we took 3 howitzer guns, bayoneting the gunners. Losses or no losses, on we went. It was just great. About this time, I found a small knoll, and being rather fatigued, 2 comrades and I sat down for a smoke and a bit of a biscuit. I remember thinking what a glorious day it was. I could hear the birds singing, and I was wondering how it could be that men should be murdering each other so on God's good Sunday, when one of my friends dropped. A sniper spotted him. He simply sank down, dead. Off we rushed again. The fire was getting hotter and hotter. I and 2 others were on the extreme left flank, and making for another rush when a shrapnel shell burst right overhead, killing the soldier on my left, and hitting me fair in the right knee. I thought the earth had hit me. Over and over I went, and for a while the pain was excruciating. I immediately charged the magazine of my rifle and started pulling myself on my stomach to the beach, a distance of quite 3 miles. Losing a lot of blood and in great pain, I persevered. I was a fine mark for the snipers on the left flank, and my tunic and breeches were riddled with bullets, but the little cherub that sits up above was good to me. I shall always remember that crawl in the terribly hilly scrub. About halfway down, I fell into a trench and became unconscious. However, 2 of my comrades found me and carried me pick-a-pack down to the beach. They were splendid chaps. I certainly owe my life to them, for had they not found me, I should have bled to death, or perhaps worse. My knee was dressed, I was laid on a stretcher and placed in a punt. All that night it rained in torrents, but I knew no more until I was hoisted aboard the transport on Monday morning. I had a lot of pain, but was quite happy. We did what we had to do, and I was proud to belong to the Australian volunteer contingent. The doctors told me I should have a stiff knee for the rest of my days as a souvenir of that terrible and yet glorious Sunday when the Australians landed on Gallipoli. To have lived through such a day and to be alive to tell the story is a sheer miracle.
Shouting out these pathetic words, goodbye.